Hello, everyone, and welcome to the final regular season episode of This Week in Fantasy Baseball. I'm John Kuh, and as always this season, I've been joined by Patrick Fitzgerald. But in this episode, we're going to go over some of the latest news and notes around baseball. We're definitely going to spend a bunch of time recapping hitter and pitcher performances. We're just going to recap streamers from last week because, again, you don't need to stream next week. The baseball season's over. So, it's going to be a little bit of a little different show. But before we get into all that, Patrick, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. I caught my last Orioles game of the season on Monday. They got a 6-0 win against the Rays, so that was nice. Dean Kramer threw a gem. Won my third place game last week thanks to a Sunday night baseball Cal Raleigh home run. So took me from a I believe it was a 3-6-3 deficit to a 6-5-1 victory. So
Wow.
It was a tight matchup, and it was a big swing. And other than that, got my RotoWire OC going, just begging any of my players to steal a base because that's the difference between, me getting first or second in my league and my overall place. So just hoping for the best there. But yeah, how are you?
I'm doing okay. I'm not doing that as well in fantasy. I think I'm in the third place game in one of my leagues, although I'm not really paying too much attention to that one right now. Mostly because I don't want to mess with the people who are playing in the championship, picking up waiver wire guys and stuff like that. So just set my lineup for the week and then kind of forgot about it. So we'll see how that all shakes out by Sunday. And then in my one roto league, I think I'm still potentially could finish in the top half. I think last I checked I was 8th. But it's a weekly league, so I really only check it about 2 times a week just to see how things are going. So, yeah, hopefully that turns out well for me by the end of the season on Sunday. But Twins finally won a series, I think, against the Rangers, so real baseball is kind of going okay. I also saw my last Twins game on Saturday. That was horrible to watch, but, nonetheless, it was still a fun cap to this season. So, yeah, it's kind of weird. Baseball, at least the regular season, is going away, and now we're going to be deep into the playoffs for the next month.
Yep, Zebby Matthews and Bailey Ober. They saved their best outings of the season for when we either were done with our seasons or we didn't need them or had given up on them. So I guess that's just the way it goes sometimes. But yeah, in the MLB, it's nice to see playoff races still happening. Right, it seems like there's a couple that could come down to the last day, so that'll be fun.
Yeah, there was definitely a thought I had maybe a month ago that the Tigers had everything sewn up, that they were going to be the number one seed in the American League. And lo and behold, that is not the case anymore. They are right now, I think, the 6th seed based on wildcard seedings, which is kind of insane. The Brewers have managed to hold on to first place, I believe, in the National League. But the Mets are just kind of trying to not die, I think is the best way to describe how they're holding on to that last wildcard spot.
Yep, they're trying to not Mets.
Yeah, exactly. Unfortunately, they've been Metsing for pretty much the entire month of September, which is both hilarious and unfortunate for Mets fans.
Yeah.
All right. Well, before we get into it, just a reminder that you can follow our podcast on Twitter at ThisWeekPL. Send us your fantasy baseball questions to our email at thisweekplpod@gmail.com. Lastly, make sure you subscribe to or follow the podcast on whatever streaming platform that you listen to. We're on all of them: Spotify, Apple, YouTube. Wherever you listen, make sure you follow us and leave a 5-star review if you enjoy the show. Again, even though the regular season is ending, we will still have some off-season content. It won't be as regular, but we will still be posting. So make sure you are still subscribed throughout the off-season just to catch some off-season baseball to help scratch an itch if you're feeling like it. We are going to go straight into injuries, and honestly, we're not going to spend too much time on this because it's not going to affect your fantasy teams. Hopefully, none of these are really affecting next year, although there are a couple names to mention that will not be participating in the 2026 season because of recent surgeries that they got. So, again, most of this stuff, because this episode also comes out on Saturday, you won't really be able to make any adjustments to your team because of what we're talking about here. But at least it's interesting to know who is going to be finishing out the season on the injury list and who's coming back for a little bit of a last gasp of baseball in the last week. So starting with placements on the injury list, we're starting with Jose Barrios of the Blue Jays going on the injury list with a right elbow inflammation. Luke Keeschall of the Twins, he's going on the list with a left thumb sprain. He sprayed it while sliding into second, I believe. Wyatt Langford, he's out with a left oblique strain. Kirby Yates for the Dodgers, right hamstring strain. That's kind of a big deal for them, at least for the playoffs, not having a stalwart in their bullpen. David Fry, kind of a scary thing here. He got hit in the face, kind of with a pitch. Well, I guess it was a foul ball But yeah, dealing with some nasal and facial fractures. Ozzy Albies, even though the season has actually kind of gone okay for him, all things considered, unfortunately he is now finishing out it on the injured list with a fractured left hamate bone in his hand. And Ty France of the Blue Jays going on the injured list with a left oblique inflammation. In terms of returns, Roki Sasaki, he's back in the bullpen, which is kind of fun for the Dodgers. We'll see how that works out for him. It could be a good glimpse into, how he's looking and, what he might look like next season. A bunch of returns, Ryan Jeffers, Xander Bogaerts, Anthony Santander, Adley Rutschman, all back with the Major League team. And Eric Cabrera, the Miami Marlins, call him back for basically the final start of the season. We kind of talked about this last week. Okay start, 4 innings, 5 hits, 3 runs, 1 walk, and 3 strikeouts.
Yeah, a couple of big ones here. Cabrera, nice to see him back on, in the season on the field. Bogarts is one of the guys I added on my speed needy team, so hopefully he gets me some steals this weekend. And then Barrios, I want to say it's the first IL stint of his career. He's been in the league for 10 years and had never been on the IL, so obviously terrible timing, but super impressive that he's been that durable. And then on the other end of the spectrum, Wyatt Langford, I feel like this is like his 3rd or 4th oblique strain of the season. Like, I don't know if it's just been bothering him all year or if he's just like kind of tightly wound or what the deal is. But I'd be a little concerned about him, being able to play a full season going forward until he's shown that he can do it.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if like the first time he heard it, he just hasn't been 100% ever since, right? And just so every stint that he comes back, it just becomes easier and easier to re-injure it. So hopefully an off-season off will help him out. He didn't necessarily look bad this year. Obviously, it's not necessarily to the level of maybe where people were drafting him at. But, a season of injuries are going to do that for you. If he can come back healthy in spring training next season, I probably expect his stock to probably stay around the same, maybe drop a tiny bit, but not too much, because I think the talent is still very much there, and you're going to draft him based on that.
Yeah, could be a nice buy low opportunity, but I think you might be right that people aren't really going to give up on him too much, so it might not actually be, that low of a price.
Yeah. In terms of some other news, Nick Lodolo left today's game with an injury. Still unsure what that injury is, but we'll see if that ends up being a more something that's going to hold him out for a little bit longer. O'Neal Cruz, he's currently day-to-day with left ankle discomfort. Luis Garcia, unfortunately, is going to be missing the entire 2022 season, likely with Tommy John surgery. The Astros have not officially announced what he's getting yet, but this is after he just basically fought his way back from Tommy John, so super unfortunate that he's dealing with this again. Randy Rodriguez of the Giants, he also underwent Tommy John surgery. He had a really nice stretch this season as a closer for San Francisco, especially after basically San Francisco kind of tore down the bullpen a little bit. So he had a really nice run as the closer, but unfortunately now he's going to be out for next season. Kate Horn currently day-to-day with an illness, also doing some back tenderness, which is kind of unfortunate because the Cubs could definitely use him in the playoffs. But they can use is Kyle Tucker, who might be returning this weekend. Regardless, he's going to be in the playoffs for the Cubs, but it looks like maybe they'll try to give him some at-bats this weekend to kind of get ready since, again, I believe the Cubs have well, no, they don't have a bye. They're the number one wild card team. So they won't have a bye. They will have to basically play their 3-game series. So we'll see kind of where Kyle Tucker, if he's healthy enough to contribute in that matchup. And then finally, Alek Manoah, the Blue Jays, he got DFA'd. Kind of notable, only because Manoah just a couple of years ago was a legitimate Cy Young candidate. And now, he's just kind of seemed to lost his touch. And unfortunately, that is resulting in him getting DFA'd.
Yep, could see him ending up on like the Angels or one of those teams that takes a chance on a lot of failed guys. So hopefully it's not the last we see of him. And then on the pitching side, Lodolo and Horton, those are 2 potential playoff starters, right? If the Reds make it there, obviously. So hopefully they're okay. It looks like minor groin injury for Lodolo, so hopefully he's not too compromised. But I guess we'll see.
Yeah, and ultimately, a bunch of these guys, again, it's not going to matter too much for your fantasy matchups. Either they're hurt or they're not, and you'll be starting them if they are. But yeah, super unfortunate at least that Randy Rodriguez, he's out for next season because I don't really know who else would have been stepping up as a closer for San Francisco. Maybe this opens the door for Ryan Walker to really kind of take that role after he got the role, then lost it, and then lost it again to Randy Rodriguez. Yeah. So we'll see what 2026 looks for guys like him.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's it for a little news recap. We're going to move on to player performances and the last version of this regular season. So who do we got here?
Yep, so going to Friday, September 19th, Justin Havelock was on our hitter recap with Hit the Jackpot for Jack Caglione. I'm going to be talking about a Royals rookie, actually, but not Jack. I'm going to be talking about Carter Jensen, catcher, DH. He had a great game on Friday, 3 for 7 with 3 doubles, 2 runs, and 2 RBI. Continued his reign of terror since being called up at the beginning of the month with 3 extra base hits, including doubles at 105 and 107 miles per hour. That was in that game, if you remember, where Max Scherzer didn't make it out of the first inning, so the Royals had an absolute field day off him. Third double was 108, so 3 really hard hit balls for Jensen. And that's kind of what he's been doing since he got called up. His stats look amazing. Obviously, we got to give it the small sample size caveat. He's running a 343 BABIP, but I don't think that's really that outlandish given his 97 mile per hour exit velocity, 21% barrel rate, almost a 60% hard hit rate, and 11% walk rate to a 17% strikeout rate. So his slash line, 304, 385, 565 as of when we're recording this. The expected stats are even better, and he's only 21 years old, and he's a catcher. So he's kind of doing everything you could ever hope for someone in their first couple of weeks in the big leagues. Is he kind of getting on our radars now in a one catcher league for next year? Or do we feel like he's more kind of still a 2 catcher AL only type consideration?
Yeah, I think the nice thing for Jensen is that he's splitting time between catcher and DH. So the Royals do really believe in his bat. He's going to get those consistent at bats as opposed to maybe other catcher options. And I mean, if you look at the bottom half of the top 12 catchers, you got Yainer Diaz, Augustine Ramirez, Drake Baldwin, Alejandro Kirk. Like all these guys are essentially not lottery tickets, but what you get out of them is not necessarily going to be amazing. So I think it's probably worth a stab at picking up Carter Jensen. And if it just doesn't work out, you can always fall back on someone like, I don't know, JT Realmuto, Dylan Digler, right? These guys are probably going to be available on your waiver wire. And if basically the worst thing that happens is that you have a bottom, a guy who's like, the 12th best catcher, like that's not really the worst situation to be in.
Yeah, I think that the Freddie Fermin trade, right? The Royals traded him to the Padres. That kind of opens up things for Jensen. Obviously, you still have Salvi, right? He's going to still, I think, catch some games next year, but they might use Jensen to slowly transition Salvi to more of a DH first base role. So I kind of like Jensen's chances at playing like 75% of the games next year, and he has really nice power upside, and he's showing some average here with how hard he's hitting the ball. So the Royals have a really weak kind of bottom half of the lineup, and they're not really big spenders necessarily. So I do like his chances of kind of carving out a big role next year. I mean, they're like the bottom of their lineup right now. They're playing Adam Frazier in left field, Michael Massey at second base, right? Obviously, position matters, but I do think that Jensen's bat is intriguing enough to really, carve out some DH catcher playing time for him next year.
Yeah, I think maybe the one question is just figuring out what do the Royals do with Jensen, with Salvi, with Caglianone, and with Vinny P, right? Like all four of those guys play some, two of the first base, DH, catcher, sort of position. So figuring out how they kind of shuffle around those guys to make sure they all get at-bats and all contributing in a big way. It kind of does mean that if one of those guys kind of goes down as like, he's not doing that well, then he's kind of the bench bat for the time being.
Right. I think you have to hope that Cag's defense in right field is going to be good enough for him to stick out there because Jensen's never played anywhere besides catcher and DH. So, and he's considered a pretty solid defensive catcher too. So that's definitely, where his long-term home is.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, the outfield, if that works out for them, then that could work out really well for unclogging that jam.
Right, and at this point, I mean, Cag still needs to prove himself as a major league hitter. So you can't. It's obviously they're going to give him a chance to succeed, but it's not like they're penciling him in the lineup every single day next year.
Right.
On the pitching side, we're going from a rookie to a veteran who's been doing it for a long time. The Molly cap was Nick's SP roundup for Tyler Molly, who did return off the IL with a nice outing. Had another one today. I'm going to talk about a little bit more of a highly touted pitcher, though. That's Sonny Gray of the Cardinals. He got the win against the Brewers in this one. 6 innings, 1 earned run, 9 hits, no walks, 7 strikeouts. So a little bit of shaky whip, but 30% CSW on 91 pitches. And Sonny did get singled out a little bit in this one, but clearly he was able to work around the traffic. And he gets the Giants for his last start of the year, which obviously you're going to be rolling with. But you look back at the season for Sonny Gray, and it's kind of been a rough one. I don't own him anywhere, but I have seen that he's had a couple of really, just kind of bad blow-up outings. The ratios right now look like a 4.33 ERA and a 1.23 WHIP. And Nick's wondering if that'll lower Sonny's ADP for next year. And if it does, Nick thinks he's in. And I kind of agree. I think this could be a really nice buy low opportunity. Sonny Gray does have a pretty long track record of success, and he's actually been pretty healthy recently. So are you with the buy low opportunity here, or do you feel like you're kind of, this is him starting to show his age a little bit and you want to jump off before it, continues to persist and go in this negative direction?
Yeah, I think I'm probably in. I mean, do you think what he goes around like pick 100 is kind of where you think he might end up?
I think later, maybe more like 150, honestly. Like the ratios are just they're just bad this year. He's not on a great team, right? I think I think he's gonna fall a little bit. I mean, I think of him like compared to someone like Nathan Eovaldi, who's going like close to 200 this year. I don't think he'll fall that much, but I think he'll be kind of like 150 or so.
Okay. Yeah, he was going 122 last year, or I guess this year in FBC ADP. So, yeah, 150 seems like a fine place to pick Sonny Gray up. Like, that's definitely a spot where if you drop him, it's not the worst thing, right? You didn't put that much investment into it. If it really looks like he's lost it, then like, oh no, you lost your SP5, right? Like that's definitely replaceable. So, yeah, I think if he's back there, it could make sense. It could be that this is just a bad year for him. I think the nice thing is that his strikeout rate is still pretty decent at 27%. Walk rate's good too at 5%. So those skills are there. I think the problem has been for him the home run rate's gone up basically ever since that crazy year in Minnesota, which we kind of expected to happen. But this year he's also giving up a bunch more hits than expected. So I wonder if that's something with the defense behind him. That the Cardinals infield has kind of been in some flux due to injuries and things like that. So, maybe if that solidifies, it gets a little bit better for him. Yeah, BABIP with 332 this year, which is 8th percentile in the league. So, yeah, I think things could improve for him in a way where the strikeout rate and the walk rate end up, kind of keeping him a decent pitcher because those are not the skills that are getting eroded.
Yeah, I'm with you. The core skills look really good. Like you said, the strikeout minus walk, 21.6%. I mean, that's borderline elite. He does give up the long ball, which has been a problem for him the past couple of years. But I think that if he's not walking a lot of guys and he's getting a decent amount of strikeouts, he can work around that, hopefully. I could see it, a kind of path to fantasy value where the ERA is not amazing. It's maybe like in the high threes as opposed to the low fours, but the whip is really solid. Like we saw 109 last year, 115 the year before, 113 the year before that. So something like a 115 would be really nice, but it is going to be his age 36 season. So, I could understand a little bit of trepidation, but I do think he could be a nice kind of mid-round pick.
Yeah, and I guess the good thing for Gray is that he's not really a high velocity guy, right? So aging for him isn't the worst thing, right? It's not like he's losing a 97 mile an hour fastball. He's at 92 right now, so it can't really get much lower for him.
Right. I guess you gotta kind of like the Aaron Nola situation. You gotta hope it doesn't fall any further because that might really lead to some problems. So
Yeah.
yeah, maybe a guy who's worth monitoring his velocity in spring training. But at the same time, I feel like some veterans take it pretty easy, so it's hard to really learn a lot from it.
Yeah. I'm kind of just looking at his stats. He was the 24th best starter in 2025. And then this season, in just looking at starters, and this is just 5x5, it looks like he was the. Where is this? He was the 58th starter. So I think if he ends up just kind of in the middle at like 40, yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I think the 14 wins and 200 strikeouts are probably doing a lot of heavy lifting with his value this year, but the ratios will probably get a little better and the wins might go down a little bit.
Yeah. All right. Well, moving on to Saturday. Thanks to Kevin O'Brien for the Nacho Supreme hitter recap article referring to Nacho Alvarez. We are going to talk about Jackson Merrill, though, of the Padres, 2 for 4 with a double, a homer, 3 runs, an RBI, and a walk. Merrill's strong September has continued, and it continued on Saturday. He was up against the White Sox in this game and hit his 15th homer of the year. In 70 plate appearances in September, he's slashing 273, 314, 682 with a 996 OPS and 6 homers. And that home run total is actually 2 more than the previous 3 months combined, which kind of just says how bad basically the summer was for Jackson Merrill. Granted, some of it was injuries, right? He only played 112 games so far in this season. So, and it's really been a sophomore slump. The ratios have been awful: 264, 316, 458, right? Compare those numbers to his September only, and you kind of see that slugging is very different. To almost 200, a little over 200 points actually. He's got a 514 slug in the second half of the season compared to a 416 slug in the first half. And so, looking at Jackson Merrill, he was drafted really high, had an ADP of 27 this year. Because last year he had 24 homers and 16 stolen bases, right? It looks like, hey, this guy could really chase the 2020 season. This year, though, like you mentioned, only 15 homers. He has only one stolen base, which is kind of insane. Kind of weighing both years into account, do you think, not do you think Merrill will drop? Because I think he will drop. But how far do you think he drops beyond, let's just say middle of the third round in next year's drafts?
Yeah, I'm thinking like maybe pick 50 or so. I mean, I was kind of shocked at the price this year. Like, I understand the season that he was coming off of, but at the same time, like, he's 21-year-old with kind of a really swing happy approach. So I was really out on the price. But I think people who were hoping to get a cheap Jackson Merrill are not really thrilled about the month that he's having, because he's just kind of building back up his value. But yeah, I think like pick 50 or so. The steals are confusing. I guess maybe it's the injuries and stuff. He's just not running to not take any chances there. But I think you could project like a 20 to 25 homer, 10 steal season for him with a higher batting average than he has now next year, maybe like 275. And he'll be right in the middle of that lineup, with a lot of counting stats. So yeah, I'm thinking like pick 50 or so. I'd be more open to taking him there than I was this year at that, borderline second round price.
Yeah, like he just basically isn't, that's around low level outfielder 1, high end outfielder 2. I think just based on how this year has gone, it feels like he's more solidified as an outfielder 2 guy for now until we see something more from him. Again, like you said, he's super young still, so there's still plenty of time for him to grow. And the injuries did kind of affect him this year, so maybe a healthy season is all he needs to kind of get back in the good graces of fantasy managers and get back to that kind of fringe outfielder 1 status. All right, moving on to pitchers. Thanks to Nick for the How It's Slade SP Roundup article referring to Slade Ciccone, who absolutely destroyed my Twins on Saturday. And the less we talk about, the better. We're going to talk about Carlos Rodón of the Yankees going up against the Baltimore Orioles, getting the win in this one. 7 innings, 1 earned run, 4 hits, 1 walk, and 8 strikeouts. We talked about Rodón at the beginning of the season, and it's probably been a big disservice to him with how well he's pitched this year that we haven't brought him up more. He's not necessarily a top 10 guy. The numbers are still really good, though. 3.04 ERA, 1.06 whip, and 17 quality starts and 17 wins. Of course, playing for the Yankees helps out with that. The strikeout rate and the walk rate are probably what hold him back from being a true ace at 26% strikeout rate and a 9.4% walk rate. But this is now 2 straight seasons in the Bronx where he's been a pretty good contributor to your fantasy team. It's usually a bit more preferable to be a lefty in Yankee Stadium anyways, as we've kind of seen with Max Fried this year. And so barring weird trade, he's going to be back there next year. Do you like Rodon's chances to basically kind of repeat this season? Very solid SP2 sort of candidate. Or is kind of the injury risk that's kind of always lingering for Rodón, right? Just 2 seasons ago, we pretty much lost him for the entire season. Is that something that you just don't want to toy with and you feel like it's better passing on him and going after someone with a little bit more upside?
Yeah, I think that he's been healthy enough the last 2 years. Looks like he's made every single start, that I don't feel comfortable considering him an injury-prone guy more than any other starting pitcher. Could just, get injured at any moment, as we, know all too well. But I do have a little bit of concern about the skills. I mean, the 230 BABIP this year is a career low, right? His strand rate is a little higher than his career. He's outperforming his peripherals a little bit. And I think that the batted ball luck, right, it's also making the whip look really good when whip isn't historically a category that he's really strong in because of the walks, like you're saying. So I think he offers a really nice floor in terms of a lot of strikeouts, a lot of wins on a really good team. But I do think that the ratio of success he's having this year is a little bit of a mirage. So I do kind of expect the price to be a lot more than I'm comfortable paying for next year. But like I said, I mean, I think that he offers something really, I wouldn't say safe, because I guess no pitcher is safe, and we've seen him get blown up, just a couple of years ago. But the overall profile, it does seem like a really nice place to start from. but I do think that he's going to be able to overprice next year.
Yeah, and kind of to that point of like things are looking really good for him this year. His home run rate has dropped from 1.59 last year to 1 homer per 9 this year, right? So that's obviously going to help the ERA a little bit. The last 2 seasons, he's had really bad home run numbers, 2.1 in 2023, 1.59 as mentioned last year. But the couple years before that, where he had just like borderline elite seasons, had a home run rate below 1 per 9. So maybe this is kind of going back to his true skills. And if it goes up a little bit, it's kind of a mid-3s ERA, maybe a low to mid whip, right? Like those are still skills that can be good, but I do think he might get dropped a little higher than I'm willing to pay.
Right, and even though I do think that it is worth noting that he's made a change this year. He introduced a sinker, or I guess reintroduced. He threw on really early in his career, but he's throwing. It's a lot slower than his fastball. It's 2 miles per hour off, so maybe it's not even like a normal sinker. But he throws it about 10% of the time. It's graded really well in stuff models, and has had great results so far. And he's generating a lot more ground balls, and I would imagine the sinker probably has something to do with that. He's less reliant on the four seam, so he is adding a little bit of a new wrinkle to his game that I'm sure will help him be a little more successful. So I do think that there's a little bit of a skills improvement here, but at the same time, I do think that the ratios are still just a little bit misleading.
Yeah, it's fun that he's willing to risk more ground balls with Anthony Volpe right behind him.
Better than fly balls in Yankee Stadium, especially down the line. You got to be careful about that.
That's definitely true. That's definitely true.
So going to the 21st, Johnny Gordon was on our hitter recap. And I'm going to focus on Ben Rice, someone who's having a great second half and a great last couple months, especially since he's found himself in a little bit more of a full-time role. He was 4 for 5 on this day with a double, home run, and 5 RBI. And it seemed like even though the underlying stuff looked really good the first couple of months, he was having a decent but not amazing year. And that's kind of changed lately. He hit a go-ahead grand slam in this one in extra innings to lead the Yankees to a win over my Orioles. 24th home run of the season. First in September 7th, but he's still been great this month despite that. 287, 342, 537 slash line after this game over his last 30. And it'll be interesting to see, if he's really good the rest of the regular season and into the playoffs. His value and his price might just kind of skyrocket going into next year. Obviously, he has catcher eligibility. He's almost like supplanted Austin Wells as the everyday catcher in the Bronx. So do we think that he's like a top 5 catcher next year, just given the context and his really solid batting line? Or are we not quite comfortable putting him in that top 5 group yet?
Yeah, I think it depends on who you have as the 4 in front of him, right? We've kind of talked about this in previous episodes. Cal's obviously number 1. No one's knocking him off from that perch right now. Shane Langoliers is definitely in that conversation. Hunter Goodman, right, as scary as it is to have a guy who plays half his game as Coors and then the other half not in Coors, he's been really solid this year as well. Willing Contreras, a little bit of a down year actually for him, but yeah, fully in that top 5 conversation. Wilson Contreras is going to lose catcher eligibility next year, which I think is a big thing. So I think the question is, would you rather have Ben Rice or Salvi? And I think I'd still rather have Salvi. So I think he doesn't crack that top 5 for me right now. But the thing is, like, after him, it's just a hodgepodge of guys. Like, it's even Herrera, Will Smith, depending on if you think there's a bounce back there. I don't necessarily think there's one there. Does Drake Baldwin take over the full-time role in Atlanta? I think that's a very interesting conversation. So I think Ben Rice is fully in the knocking on the door of top 5 conversation. I just don't think he's there just yet.
Yeah, I think it's close between him, Salvi, Will Smith. That's kind of the question of 5th for me. I guess Ivan Herrera too, if he can, stay healthy. I guess he might not have catcher eligibility in some formats at least right away, so that's definitely worth monitoring. I do think Rice, he might get the 5th for me just because he hasn't played every day this year, but he's still had a really solid season. So I think next year he's going to be playing almost every day, like 140 to 150 games, and that volume just will just pump up his value even more. So I'll have to dive into it in the offseason, but he's definitely got himself into the conversation, which is impressive, just given kind of where his stock was at the beginning of the year as an intriguing guy, and now he's kind of made himself an everyday guy in a really solid lineup.
Yeah, he had some ridiculous home run games that were like, oh, I got to pick this guy up, and then he just wasn't getting the consistent play time to validate keeping him on your roster for a bit.
Yeah, especially when he didn't have the catcher eligibility.
Yeah, like he was just a first base guy, right? Was that pretty much it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
On the pitching side, final dynasty was Nick's SP roundup for Cade and Dana. I'm going to talk about somebody else. Though. I'm going to talk about Spencer Strider of Atlanta. He was at Detroit in this one. Got the win with 5 scoreless innings, 6 hits, 3 walks, 6 strikeouts. So not a great whip, but a good ERA. 14 whiffs, 26% CSW on 101 pitches. The slider wasn't great in this one, Nick felt like, and the velocity was also middling, 95 miles per hour on the fastball, but the shape was good. A vertical break, over 17 inches, even though usually he's under 16. And the height adjusted vertical approach angle was 1.4, so clearly above average there. And the curveball actually did the heavy lifting in this one, which is Strider's third outing that kind of goes in and out. But this one, it was great. 29% swing strike rate, 5 whiffs, and a 47% CSW. And he got the Pirates, or he's getting the Pirates in his last outing of the season, which is obviously an auto start. But that doesn't change the fact that it's been a really disappointing season for Strider this year. I want to say, I have to pull up his exact numbers, but he has an ERA of 4.45 in 119 innings, so not a small sample size, and a 1.38 whip. He does have 126 strikeouts in those 119 innings, which is nice, but a far cry from the guy he used to be, and even the slightly diminished version we might have been expecting when he came back from surgery. So obviously he's a tough guy to project, right? But let's just say he makes 30 starts, he stays healthy. What do you think is like a reasonable expectation for Strider next year?
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing with him is that his ERA has never been like that great.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think a good projection for him is like mid to high threes.
Yeah.
Because he does have not well, I mean, he's kind of shown a little bit of a homer issue this season, so that might not disappear next year. I think his whip has always been was pretty decent. Again, last 2 seasons, like it's this season, just hasn't been that great. Like if you could bring it down to a 1-2, get to like maybe a 27% strikeout rate, I think that could be really pretty decent as like a SP3 with SP1 potential. I think the intriguing thing is that he had 17 inches of vert in this game, right? If he can make that consistent, that's bringing that fastball back to where it was in 2022, 2023 when it was just one of the best pitches in the game. And if you can really get back to there, then I think that's where you start seeing like, hey, like that's a low threes, a one whip sort of guy. Let's at like 30% strikeout rate, like that could be real if that ends up working out that way. But right now, it's just one start. It's hard to say if that's going to be consistent. And we're going to see that next year. So I think, yeah, mid to high threes ERA and then like a 1.2 whip.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I think that will kind of be the projection that his draft price is based on. I'm a little bit more bearish, I would say. I mean, the tough thing is that with it's basically a two-pitch approach. He sprinkles in the curveball and changeup, but only like 10% of the time. So it's almost like his fastball needs to be elite or at least borderline elite for him to be the guy you want him to be. And we've seen the shape get worse and the velocity get worse this year. So obviously he's going to have 4 or 6 months to go back to the drawing board and work on what he struggled with. And he seems like a pretty cerebral pitcher, and I think that he will improve. But I'm thinking more high threes ERA, maybe even 4. But I agree that the whip and the strikeouts will still be good, and maybe the Braves will turn it around next year, and he'll be a decent win source. So I think I'm probably going to be out at the price, but it is a high ceiling play, like you said.
Yeah. I mean, just looking at his fastball on the season, 15.4 inches of vert, right? And you look at the really good seasons 2 years ago, or I guess, yeah, 2 years ago, 2023, 17.4. So if this fastball is back where it was in 2023, that I think that's where we see like the big change and the improvement because of that two pitch mix that he's got.
Right, and with the vert to put that in even more context, when you throw a pitch slower, it has more time to break, and so he's throwing slower and with less vert, right? So the shape has actually gotten significantly worse because, it would be one thing if it just lost an inch or two at the same velo, but it's coming in slower and it's has less ride on it, so that's really concerning.
Yeah. All right. Well, moving on to Monday, thanks to Christian Oneman for the Fermin's Paradox hit a recap article referring to Freddie Fermin. We're going to talk about Rafael Devers of the Giants, 1 for 3 with a homer, a run, an RBI, and a walk. which isn't a great line, but it's an interesting line, I guess. Because Devers, yeah, the experiment this year in San Francisco has not gone super well. He's actually performed worse with San Francisco with a 70-90 OPS than he was in Boston, 905 OPS, which is kind of crazy. But the power is still there, right? 33 homers for the third time in his career. And, you know, as long as you hit homers, you're going to have pretty good fantasy value. Of course, being in San Francisco is not as helpful with being in Fenway as a righty, right? It's just the Green Monster is going to help so much with all your stats. But I think he's still in the conversation for the third best third baseman. I think he's actually flown under the radar with how decent he's actually been this year. He's actually had the best season in terms of runs, homers, and RBI since 2021. His average did dip by a little bit this season. I think it dropped 20 points, but his OBP was actually a lot crazier at 370. That's his best mark ever in his career. So it's kind of a mixed bag for him because even though, yeah, this season maybe has not gone as great as we were expecting from Devers, it still actually was like a pretty decent like career year for him compared to how he's been playing for the last 3-4 years. Devers going to pick around 41 this past draft. Do you think he kind of stays around there, or is just the narrative around Devers just negative enough to kind of push him down next year and, you know, kind of push him down into like the next tier of third baseman?
Yeah, I think his price is going to take a small hit, but I don't think it's because of the production. I think it's because of the eligibility. It looks like he's just going to be a first base guy next year. He has at least gotten enough starts at first to get that instead of util only, which is really nice. First base isn't the stacked position that maybe it was like 10 years ago in fantasy, but I think it's better than third base, which is pretty weak right now. So I think that might, you know, cause him to drop by like 5 or 10 picks, and combined with the slightly worse hitting environment, right? San Francisco, worse lineup, worse park. But I mean, clearly he can still swing it and be a great power and runs an RBI source. So I don't think he'll be going ahead of Vladdy, right? Pete Alonso will probably be going ahead of him at first base, and then Nick Kurtz is probably going to go ahead of him too. So him against like Freddie Freeman is interesting to think about. Freeman's had a pretty solid year, but not amazing. Or like Matt Olson, right? I think I probably like Devers more than Olson. So he's a borderline top 5 first baseman. So I think that he's gonna fall a little bit, but I think could be a really nice, you know, kind of like your second or third best hitter on your fantasy team.
Yeah, just looking at the Fangraphs auction calculator, Devers currently ranks as the 4th best first baseman, which I find interesting. But it is kind of adjusted to his position for being a third baseman. So I think if you knock his auction value down, comparing to actually the auction value of a first baseman versus a third baseman, it's kind of in line with what Vlad's season has looked like, which is kind of interesting. So still a top 5 first baseman, but yeah, it's maybe not as easy to be like, oh, I want Devers over a guy like Madelson or Vlad. Like those are a little bit harder conversations than do you want Devers or Michael Garcia, right? Like that's a pretty, I think that's probably an easier question to answer
Right.
than Devers versus Vladdy.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, moving on to pitchers. Thanks to Nick for the agoraphobia SP roundup article referring to Mackenzie Gore, who did not have a good start on Monday. But we're going to talk about Nick Pivetta, the Padres. Going against Milwaukee, 5.2 innings, 3 runs, 4 hits, 5 walks, and 5 strikeouts. Yikes. Not a great line, but we're not going to talk about that game specifically. We're just going to talk about Pivetta's season because, yeah, it's kind of crazy. It's actually his first season under 4 for his ERA, and he decided that he was going to be so good that it's actually his first season under 3 for an ERA. So kind of nuts that Pivetta's improved so much in San Diego. Part of the reason is because the home run rate went down by a lot. He actually gave up the same number of home runs, but he pitched a lot more this season. Of course, that kind of explains the ERA drop by over a point. He also dropped 14 points in WHIP, going from a 1.13 WHIP to a 0.99 WHIP. So going from a pretty good WHIP to like a pretty elite WHIP. Part of that is because he had a 6.4 hit per 9, fairly unsustainable, but that's also because of a 234 BABIP, which is a result of the fly balls that he's giving up not leaving the park because he plays with the Padres. And Petco is big. Part of that too also though is Nick suspecting that the dead end ball, the thing that Major League Baseball loves to tinker with, might be helping Pivetta out a little bit more. So that's kind of why the fly balls aren't leaving the park as much as they used to before. So yeah, it's kind of an interesting story all around Pivetta. He's got a player option for next year, so it's still up in the air whether he's going to return to the Padres. But he was a top SP2 this season. Nick had him ranked 19th. I think he's fully in that SP2 conversation. Just didn't really have enough strikeouts to be a true ace. That being said, let's just assume the ball is what it is next season. Do you think a lot of this improvement is because of the ball, or is there like some skills that he's kind of showing in his age 32 season that could actually translate into more success next year?
Yeah, I think unfortunately the venue and maybe the ball, whatever, speculation might be there, doing a lot of the heavy lifting here. He's another guy who did add a sinker like Rodón, but only 4% of the time, so it's not featuring as prominently as it did for Rodón. So helping him keep the ball in the park a little bit more, adding that wrinkle to his game. But for the most part, he's kind of a similar guy to what we've seen in the past. He's got that super over the top delivery, the fastball, sweeper, curveball trio is kind of what he leans on the most. And it's the same thing this year. And I think that the park has just gone a long way for him, combined with some bad ball luck, right? 235 BABIP, unsustainably low, even with the fly ball tendencies. So I think, again, similar to Rodón, he's going to be overpriced next year. And I really liked him coming into this year. And I had one share, but I'm kind of kicking myself for not getting more because I did think that this was a great context for him to be in. So I think he'll be a nice mid-rotation guy next year. But given the line that he's put up, I think you're going to have to pay a little bit more than that, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that's how I kind of felt about Pivetta too. I loved him last season, and then the wheels just fell off in the second half of the year. So that wasn't fun. And then I was like, I don't know if I can jump on the Pivetta wagon again. And then of course he goes on and has his best career year.
Yeah, I mean, I think people at a certain point were asking like why he was still in the MLB, and now we see why, right? There's a reason why guys with good stuff like this get given a million chances, and it's because it can end up looking like this eventually.
Right. And of course, when you play a lot of your games at Fenway, it's just not going to look good.
Yeah, it just makes what Chris Sale and Garrett Crochet have done lately even more impressive.
Yeah, definitely.
So going to Tuesday, September 23rd, Elly roll with Scott McDermott's hitter recap title. Of course, for Elly De La Cruz, who finally hit a home run on Tuesday. I think he has like 3 home runs in the last 3 months or something crazy like that. He seemed like he was on track to be another top 5 pick next year with a great power speed blend. Hasn't trended that way. So I was thinking that we could do an interesting debate about 2 fantasy players that really couldn't be more different, but I think we'll both be like back of the first round or early second round targets next year. That's Kyle Schwarber, right? Util only, and Elly De La Cruz. So just to give a comparison of what they've done this year, Elly's gone 21 homers, 36 steals, 185 combined, runs and RBI, hitting 266. And then Schwarber on the other side, he had 2 home runs yesterday. He's approaching 60 for the year. He's got 56 homers, 110 runs, 132 RBI, 246, and 10 steals, right? So he's contributing all across the board. Obviously, it's a career year. He's going to be a free agent, so his value is going to depend some on where he signs. But these are 2 guys who, like I said, couldn't be more different, but poised to deliver big fantasy value. Is there one that you like better just because of their skills or how you like to build your teams? Where do you fall?
I would love to have Schwarber on my team. I think it just the sheer number of counting stats, and also the fact that his average, like, it's not horrible at 246. It's not good, but it's not horrible. Mm-hmm. Makes him like a very, very fun guy to have on your team because you kind of just know he's going to be pretty consistent in producing. That being said, being util only scares me a little bit, just in terms of like you don't want like drafting util only guy. Like it's got to be a guy like Ohtani, and there's maybe an argument that like Schwarber is like kind of approaching Ohtani level with his counting stats this season. And then I don't know, it just like if he's not in Philly, I'm kind of wondering how those runs and RBIs get affected, because he's got 56 homers, like you mentioned. He's got 110 runs, which actually means he's got a good offense behind him that is still batting him in when he gets on base. He's got 132 RBI, which means that people are actually getting on base before him, which is making those homers a lot more productive. If you go somewhere where that's not the case, then it's a little scary. part of me like just wants to go with Elly though, because it's like it's a 5 category guy. He actually like showed improvement in terms of lowering his strikeout rate this season, to a point where it's like, hey, maybe there's actually some real thing here. He's not, confined to a DH only sort of role. And so I think like if I have to choose between the two of these guys, I think I take Elly. But man, I would not be disappointed if I had Schwarber on my fantasy team.
Yeah, it's a tough comparison. I think Schwarber is at least likely to sign with a team that's a contender and has a good offense. Probably not as good as the Phillies, but still good. I think for me, it's a format dependent play. Like if it's Roto, I think I'm going Elly because the steals. I hate having to chase steals like I'm doing right now in my league. It's kind of frustrating. And, a lot of steals guys are one dimensional and you don't want too many of them. But if it's a weekly league where I don't care as much about stolen bases because they're kind of fluky and hard to rely on, I might lean Schwarber. I had to see what the projections and all that say in the offseason, but I like to lean into the more power heavy guys in kind of the weekly formats because steals, it's just hard to depend on as a category unless you absolutely stack it.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where Schwarber is like the super interesting one, because it's like he could very easily just be like a 45 homer, 110 runs, 130 RBI guy, regardless of where he goes, right? Like that's definitely possible. And Elly, on the other hand, is just like so intriguing. Like, what if he actually gets to 30 homers next year and is like a 30-30 guy, right? Like, that's possible for him. He's got a 266 average, which is actually like a lot higher than I thought it was going to be this year. So, yeah, I don't know. Elly's had a really impressive year this year, and it's hard to believe that it would be hard to believe that he does not improve on this in a way where it's an interesting conversation between him and Schwarber.
Yeah, exactly. So on the pitching side, you just mentioned Shohei Ohtani, the hitter. We're going to talk about Shohei Ohtani, the pitcher now. Led by a Zeb plan was Nick's SP roundup for Zebby Matthews, who had a great start. Maybe it's just good enough for me to be interested in him again next year because I'm a big fan. But Ohtani was at the Diamondbacks. No decision despite 6 scoreless, 5 hits, no walks, 8 strikeouts, 16 whiffs, 34% CSW, and 91 pitches. And this was an ace is going to ace moment as Ohtani was pretty much fully stretched out here. Saved his best start of the season for the last one right before the playoffs. Even though some of us might have missed out on it, unfortunately, with our head-to-head leagues over, the splitter was not really Ohtani's go-to like it has been in years past, but the sweeper was great. Sliders, curveballs, and sweepers, so a ton of breaking pitches he scattered in double-digit times thrown. Mostly curves for lefties, sweepers for righties, sliders to batters with both-handedness. Not to mention, he sat 98 with a 1.4 height-adjusted vertical approach angle and good extension. So super well-rounded arsenal here, even with the splitter not being a featured offering all that much. And Nick's wondering how he's going to be treated next year. Will he be babied by the Dodgers? Are they going to let him go a little bit more like they did in this one? I think a 6-man rotation is probably still likely. So let's think about the Yahoo format where Ohtani hitter and Ohtani pitcher, they're separate players. How do you value Ohtani the pitcher? Is he a top 100 player for you? Even higher than that? Well, where do you fall on him?
Yeah, I mean, if it's a 6-man rotation, and assuming the Dodgers do the Dodger thing where they, do baby a little bit. Like, let's just say Ohtani gets like 140 innings, and he's at this like mid-2s ERA, 1 WHIP with at least a strikeout an inning. Like, it's hard for me to not say that pitcher Ohtani is like a top 100 player, right? Like, you're losing out at most on like, basically you just don't have him as a 2-start pitcher, but he probably starts every week for your team, which I think is pretty good. Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to find a comp, but the weird thing is like there's just like it's hard to find pitchers who like are really elite for only 140 innings and figure out where they go. So I do think just because of the nature of it, Shohei Ohtani, he's going to be a top 100 player. Like that's just going to happen, and I think he probably returns value in the like 8th, 9th round. Is probably where I'm comfortable with saying that. Like, yeah, I'd pick up Ohtani there and not have any issue with having him at that spot.
Yeah, he might even be top 75. Honestly, it's the skills this year are crazy good. It's hard to really buy into them as sustaining at this ridiculous level because he's been pitching in a lot of abbreviated outings, right? Like the 33% strikeout rate, 28% strikeout minus walk rate. Like that's not going to keep up, but the skills are still going to be great. I mean, he's a guy, He's thrown 528 innings in his career with a 3 ERA and a 1.08 whip, right? So his ratios are elite. So honestly, the more that I'm kind of diving into it and like refamiliarizing myself with him as a pitcher almost, because it's been a while, right? So we have to take a look and realize just how good he's been over the course of his career. So yeah, I think top 100 easily, maybe even top 75. I'd be interested to see how his price compares to like Jacob deGrom before this year, right? Obviously, we've seen a healthy season from deGrom now, so his price is going to go up, but maybe it'll be more like that, right? Where he's like pick 50 or so, where you hope he stays on the mound. I do have a little concern about, if something minor comes up, they might just rest him as a pitcher for a month. But yeah, I think in a league where it's shallower, maybe the replacement level is pretty high, you feel comfortable taking this Ohtani shot, pretty comfortably inside the top 100.
Yeah, I'm just looking at like the elite pitchers. They're all at 180 innings, right? Like 100, like guys like in the mid twos for ERA. It's like Hunter Brown, Brian Wu ish, 2.94. Paul Skeens obviously 1.97 whip ERA there. Scooby had a 2.21 whip. Max Reed 2.86. Christopher Sanchez with a 2.57 ERA. Garrett Crochet 2.59 ERA. Like, is he going ahead of Christopher Sanchez next year in drafts?
If he is, I think it's a mistake. I would definitely prefer Sanchez. Not that
Yeah.
Ohtani's a bad pick, but just given the volume.
Right, exactly, right. So it's like let's just say you get Christopher Sanchez with like 50 fewer innings. I don't see that as like a thing that would scare me off too much. Like like again, like if I just think about weekly leagues, it just means that he's only pitching once a week.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do like him. Yes, like end of round 6 feels aggressive, but also like that's SP2, SP3 territory, and Ohtani is like very capable of being that guy.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, well, moving on to Wednesday. Thanks to Kyle Stansel for the Love Sosa hitter recap article referring to Mundo Sosa, who's on a nice little tear right now in the Philly infield. But we're going to talk about a different NL East player, and that is James Wood. 2 for 4 with 2 homers, 2 runs, and 2 RBI. He continued his outstanding 2025 season by reaching the 30 homer milestone to lead Washington over Atlanta 4-3 on Wednesday. Of course, we should really specify this is the 2025 season. Wood has not been very good over the past couple months. His full line on the season's he's got 86 runs, 92 RBI, 30 homers, 15 stolen bases, 256, 352, 475 slash line. He's got a 32% strikeout rate, but he's got almost a 13% walk rate. That's really good. But now let's look at the second half of the season. So really the last 2 months ish, or 2.5. 38.7% strikeout rate, slashing 223, 305, 384 with only 6 homers. So yeah, the season long numbers look great. But if you've had him on your fantasy team for the last 2.5 months, you've probably been absolutely frustrated. I think Scott Chu put him as like a desperate start on his hitter list article that came out a couple days ago, which is kind of crazy for a guy where you look at the line, he's got 30 homers this season. He's knocking on the door of 100 RBI. And yet this is a guy who's just been completely not trustworthy for the last 2 months. According to the auction calculator, he's around the 45th ranked player when you combine pitchers and batters. So that puts him kind of in the 3rd, 4th round. Do you think he should be going there in drafts, or do you think just the hype is so high that even with this kind of down second half of the season, he's going to go a lot earlier in drafts?
Yeah, I think the strong finish is going to bump up the price a little bit. He was going around like 50th, I think, last season, which I thought was crazy, and he's returned the value, like you said. So I think he might get pushed up like 10 picks or maybe a round. Obviously, the skill set has clear flaws, but he has as much power as anybody in the league. He just has trouble tapping into it sometimes. He doesn't pull the ball in the air like very much at all. He hits the ball on the ground a little too much. So even despite that, right, he has 30 home runs. So clearly the juice is there. I do think that his price is going to go up a little bit. Him and like P. Crow Armstrong, Elly De La Cruz, those are all guys that trying to evaluate them coming and going into next draft season is just going to be a headache. I mean, they're so up and down, but the upside is so high. So it's going to be a real challenge.
Yeah, when I was thinking about Wood, I was thinking exactly about PCA, just kind of a guy who really elite skills for the first half of the season fell way down to earth the next 2 months, and then it's kind of picked it up a little bit in September to kind of just remind people, oh, yeah, I'm actually this good. And yeah, it's just going to be really frustrating diagnosing all these guys and figuring out like what's real, what's not. Makes you really love roto formats because you don't have to worry about stuff like this. But again, like, in head-to-head leagues and weekly leagues, like, yeah, some of these guys can be absolute headaches because you don't know if it makes sense to drop a guy that you spend a pretty high draft pick on because he just cannot hit for the last like 4 weeks.
Yeah, and I'm looking at like some rolling charts right now because on Savant, James Wood, he crushes fastballs, but then breaking balls and off speed, he's kind of slightly below average again. So I was looking at his rolling charts to see if he's been seeing more off speed throughout the course of the year. And it looks like primarily changeups. It's kind of been like that. Sliders, curveballs seems to be relatively stable, but he's been seeing a lot more changeups lately. And I think that that might be contributing to his struggles as well. So, maybe the book's getting out on him a little bit. But I mean, you can't make mistakes against a guy like this, right? He's going to hurt you in the power department. So I think that the power floor is still really nice, even if he's having some struggles against changeups.
Yeah. Yeah. Even in this off season, so to speak, right? 30 home runs. Really impressive.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to pitchers. Thanks to Nick for the dip, dive, duck, and Taj. SP brought up article. Second Twins player this week, which is kind of impressive. Of course, referring to Taj Bradley, who Nick would not touch with a 10-foot pole, despite the fact that he played pretty decent for the Twins last night. But we're going to talk about another Philly pitcher, Jesus Luzardo, going up against his old team. Got the win against Miami. 7 innings, no runs, 3 hits, no walks, and 10 strikeouts. Luzardo ends the year with a 3.03 ERA. Just kidding. That's actually if you remove those back-to-back starts of 20 earned runs in 5.2 innings. Everyone remembered those. Those were pretty awful. But actually, you put those back in, he's got like a 3.9-ish ERA. But it's been quite a fun year for Luzardo. He's kind of regained some fantasy relevance. He's returning a high 20s strikeout rate. He's got 18 quality starts and 15 wins, which I think is pretty impressive. The sweeper this year was his killer offering, had a 40.5% CSW on 31% usage. I think that's pretty impressive, the fact that he's using it so much and still getting that many whips and called strikes. Still, his volatility is what can be scary, right? Like, again, he gave up 20 earned runs in 5-ish innings, and that was like in the turn between, I want to say it was like May to June, and that was when Luzardo was like getting a lot of hype, and all of a sudden he goes out and just lays like 3 consecutive eggs that were awful. And yeah, so I don't know. Has Luzardo shown enough this year to make you think that he's actually worth picking up in drafts next year? Let's just say like before pick 120, or is he a guy where the volatility just is scary enough that you'll let someone else handle the mess?
Part of me wants to make him like one of my biggest pitcher targets next year, depending on the price, just because of how high the upside is, how much he underperformed his peripherals by. And then part of me is terrified because we know how ugly it can be. And the splits are kind of crazy. I was just looking at his lefty righty stuff. So obviously the sweeper that he developed, right? It's a killer offering against lefties, but righty is not as effective. His strikeout minus walk rate against lefties is 35%. So he's literally like Cy Young against lefties, and then righties, it's 16.8%, which is still good, but the gap in like his ERA estimators is about 2 full runs, depending on lefties and righties. So he might be the kind of guy where like you're a little scared to start him against a lineup with a ton of good righty hitters. So, given the price you have to pay, it's not a guy you want to be sweating matchups for. But at the same time, I mean, the strikeouts are going to be there. The wins are going to be there on the Phillies. Next year is his last year before free agency. And yeah, he's got a really nasty arsenal. So I think I'm going to be in unless the price is crazy high. So I like taking swings at some of these pitchers because I feel good about my ability to get stable ones early in the draft and spec on guys middle and late. So yeah, I think I'm going to be in on him next year.
Yeah, he's currently ranked the 37th best pitcher for 5x5 leagues on the player rater. Which kind of puts him, funny, right at Sandy Alcantara, where Sandy Alcantara was drafted last year at 137. So kind of fringe 10th round sort of guy. And yeah, man, I love the Jesus Lizard. He's just so much fun. But like the volatility is so scary. But yeah, he's enjoyable. And I think when he's on your team, I think it's fun to follow him because I think there's just absolute brilliance like this game, right? 7 innings, 10 strikeouts. which is nuts. But yeah, nonetheless, he's a really fun guy to have on your team until he just gives up 10 runs in a game.
Right. And I remember we talked about him in like April or May, and I felt pretty confident that he had unlocked a new level. And then clearly he took a big step back, but it's nice to see him finishing strong. And the one thing is the extension, right? He has terrible extension, like close to the worst in the league. So he basically needs to throw hard and needs to have really good stuff to make up for it. So it does put a little bit of pressure on, his velocity and how nasty his stuff is, unfortunately.
Yeah, and probably like just because your mechanics have to be so clean in order to be able to throw the way he does with that limited extension. Not saying it necessarily leads to more injury risk, but it is a thing that maybe can lead to some volatility if you just don't have your velocity one of these days.
Right. And hopefully that there was some tipping issues. I know that was speculated, but hopefully that was the case and it's something that he's able to fix and, avoid those crazy bad outings in the future.
Yeah. All right. Well, that wraps it up for the last player performance segment of the season. We are going to move on to streamers, but not streamers for next week. We're just going to take a look back at some of the guys that we recommended, see how they're doing, and maybe look forward to a couple guys that are still yet to go.
Yeah, so I know that last week's recap, we had a ton of success with the streamers. I'm just going to tie up the loose ends here. A little bit more of a mixed bag this week. Jameson Taillon finished off his two-start week with a great outing in his second start on Sunday. Tough luck loser, unfortunately, but 7 innings, 1 earned, 4 strikeouts, .71 whip. On the other end of the spectrum, Jason Alexander got absolutely blown up by the Mariners on Sunday Night Baseball. 1 1/3, 7 earned, 1 strikeout, and a 6 whip, so huge loss there. I think when I recommended that one, it was a pure volume play. So, it wasn't my preferred option, but he did take a tough one. And then going to last week's recommendations, Tyler Wells had his worst start of the year, but it wasn't horrible. 4 innings, 3 earned, 4 strikeouts, 2 whip. Chad Patrick was used as kind of a bulk pitcher or opener. He threw 3 scoreless innings with 6 strikeouts. Kaiwei Tang pitches against the Rockies this weekend, so no results on him. And then the Rays kind of have been doing weird things with their pitchers this week. So Ian Seymour's schedule got pushed around and he actually didn't get 2 starts. So he wouldn't have been a target of mine had the schedule changed. So yeah, streamers have been good this year. I've been able to, use some of these guys on my team, sometimes wishing I had more of them, sometimes less. But yeah, I think that it's been fun, and doing the schedules article throughout the year for the site has given me a ton of insight in terms of planning ahead and targeting guys who have really nice upcoming matchups.
Yeah, I think I said this a couple years ago when we were doing streamer segments. As long as you just have like a good idea of like the upcoming 2 weeks of a schedule, you can kind of pick out these guys. Yeah. Obviously, like you could do a little bit more research once it's like really solidified which guys are starting where. But those like the expected schedules article is super helpful just to kind of figure out like, oh yeah, like who's got a good matchup coming up in a week that I could like potentially target like on a slow Thursday waiver wire or something like that could be a good Monday or Tuesday start. So yeah, always super helpful to figure out what streamers are coming up in the week and who are guys that we should target.
Yeah, and in FBC leagues, you can save a ton of fab if you plan ahead on, if you see like someone has a good 2 start next week and you have the spot to take them on, you can get them for $1 or $2 instead of 15 or 20. So it's been a really nice kind of tactical advantage for me this year for sure.
Yeah, one of these years I will try it in FBC, but the past 2 seasons, I just like my team just always ends up like 12th by the end of the first month. And I'm like, all right, I think I'm out. So
yeah, you got to really nail the draft. It's tough.
It is tough. I think this year I went hard on Jordan Alvarez, and we all know how that one went.
I feel you.
Yeah. Well, anyways, that is it for this episode of This Week in Fantasy Baseball. Thanks again for listening to us this entire regular season. Obviously, a big thank you to the Hitter Recap crew. We mention them every single week. Kyle Stanzel, Scott McDermott, Christian Ottoman, Johnny Gordon, Kevin O'Brien, Justin Havlock. I don't know if I'm missing someone there. But yeah, all those guys, super helpful in writing those write-ups for not just us, but we do take from them to kind of pick our guys throughout the week. And of course, Nick for writing the SP roundup and giving us guys to talk about there as well. So big shout out to those guys for putting this content out every single day. But yeah, for us, you can find us on Twitter, This Week PL. You can send us your comments or questions at thisweekplpod@gmail.com. You can find myself on Twitter at the John Cuh, Patrick at pfitzgerald_99. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the Pitch List podcast feed on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever else you listen to your podcast, and leave a 5-star review if you enjoy the show. Again, we will be recording stuff throughout the off season. It won't be necessarily every single week, but we'll have content coming out, throughout the next, I guess, 6 months. So yeah, definitely keep checking the podcast feed and obviously checking out the Discord as well to see when we've got content coming out. Lastly, sign up for Pitch List Pro. I know it's the end of the season, so feels like a weird time to plug signing up for Pitch List Pro, but it's an opportunity to join us in the Discord, still talk about baseball and also a bunch of other things throughout the off season. You can still, figure out fantasy advice there because Dynasty is still going on if you're in part of those Dynasty leagues. So definitely get some advice there throughout the off season for how to figure out your first year player drafts or maybe some Dynasty trades that you're thinking about. So anyways, that is all for this week. We will be back next week with another episode of This Week in Fantasy Baseball. But for Patrick, I'm John, and we'll see you in the next one. Later, everyone.